American growers in their 50s and 60s are cursing compacted clay again this growing season, and the mistake costing them hundreds isn't the soil. Not because you did something wrong, because nobody ever showed you these 12 perennials turn compacted clay into a permanent advantage instead of a yearly fight. Before plant number 1, drop your state right now, because your USDA zone completely changes which of these performs best for you. Find yours and pay attention. And the one at number 12, watch the nursery industry replace it with something cheaper for 3 generations. Plant number 1, cardinal flower. Most American growers walk past the most vivid red bloom in the garden because they assume their clay is too wet for anything worthwhile. But this exclusive hummingbird plant, pollinated by no other North American bird, was built for exactly that soil, zones 3 through 9, full sun to part shade moist clay. This scarlet spike's flower shape is built for one visitor only, a hummingbird's bill, and nothing else pollinates it. USDA Plants database confirms 0 other North American bird pollinates this bloom, a documented ecological exclusive. This $18 plant, grown in consistently moist clay, self-seeds naturally into a permanent colony within 3 years. The single costly mistake most growers make is planting it in soil that ever fully dries between waterings. That single dry spell kills the plant outright, forcing a full $18 replacement every time it happens. That single moist clay rule is the entire reason this hummingbird exclusive survives, where sandy soil gardens fail every single time. But the next perennial does something even more dramatic. It turns that same wet clay into 6-foot plumes of cotton candy pink. Drop your state below, so your zone confirms whether this is coming to your yard. And somewhere in this video is the story of a grower in Indiana who fought his clay soil for 14 years. That story is coming. Keep watching. Plant number 2, Queen of the Prairie. 6-foot plumes of cotton candy pink rise straight out of clay that most growers were told could never support anything this dramatic. This is the most spectacular clay perennial on the entire list, and it spreads permanently through its own rhizomes. Those 6-foot plumes appear only when clay stays consistently moist all season, not when growers add feeding or fertilizer. Missouri Botanical Garden documents its rhizomes spreading naturally through clay into a permanent border colony. That single $24 plant compounds every year into a permanent clay border worth far more than one nursery visit. The single mistake most growers make is placing it in full sun with dry soil instead of partial shade. That wrong placement stunts the plumes permanently, wasting the full $24 investment for good every time. That shade requirement is the exact reason this plant compounds into a permanent colony instead of stunting into a wasted $24 investment. Next comes a native iris. Most growers confuse with its far more fragile cousin, and that mix-up kills it by the first hard freeze. Have you ever grown a native perennial only to realize later you had the wrong species entirely? Plant number 3, Blue Flag Iris. This native iris opens violet cathedral blooms every May in the exact wet clay that kills its more fragile bearded cousin outright. USDA Plants database confirms this species tolerates clay and standing water, where garden center iris varieties simply cannot survive. Zones 3 through 9, full sun to part shade, wet clay. This native iris divides naturally every 4 years, and each division becomes a permanent clay, anchoring colony instead of a repeat purchase. USDA Plants database documents its native status, confirming clay and wet soil tolerance no bearded iris variety shares. That single $20 plant multiplies through division into several plants without ever buying another. The single costly mistake is planting a bearded iris instead in that same wet clay bed. Wrong genus rots by the first winter, forcing a full replacement purchase every single time. That permanent division cycle is why this iris anchors a clay border for decades instead of one season. But the next perennial does something no other plant on this list can. It blooms in late summer, when every other garden has already given up for the year. And it hosts a butterfly species under federal conservation monitoring. Plant number 4, turtlehead. This one blooms in late summer into early fall, 6 weeks after most clay perennials have already finished for the year. University of Maryland Extension confirms it as the exclusive host plant for the Baltimore checkerspot, a federally monitored species. Zones 3 through 8, part shade, in warm zones, moist clay. This hooded bloom extends the clay garden's color window 6 full weeks past every other perennial on this list. University of Maryland Extension documents it as the sole host plant. A federally monitored butterfly species depends on to survive. That single $20 plant protects a documented conservation relationship. No substitute perennial provides. The single mistake growers in zones 6 through 9 make is planting it in full sun instead of afternoon shade. That wrong placement scorches the foliage and stalls bloom, wasting the season's $20 investment entirely. That afternoon shade rule is the entire reason this butterfly host survives zones 6 through 9, instead of scorching out. The next perennial flips the calendar completely. It opens gold blooms through standing water before almost anything else in the yard has even woken up. Drop your zone below if you have ever wondered what blooms first in wet clay. Plant number 5, marsh marigold. This one opens gold blooms through standing water before almost anything else in the clay garden has even stirred for the season. USDA Plants Database confirms it as one of the earliest native bloomers documented for wet clay conditions, zones 3 through 7, full sun to part shade, standing water tolerant. This early bloomer goes fully dormant by midsummer, vanishing completely from the bed until the following spring returns. USDA Plants Database confirms this dormancy cycle as natural and expected, not a sign of plant failure or death. That single $20 plant pairs perfectly with a summer bloomer planted nearby to cover the exact same clay space. The single mistake growers make is pulling it out in July, assuming it died from the wet clay. That wrong assumption wastes the full $20 investment, removing a plant that would have returned every spring. That natural dormancy cycle is exactly why pairing it with a summer bloomer keeps this clay bed full all season long. The next plant does something almost no rose can survive. Fragrant pink blooms rooted directly in standing water and wet clay. Have you ever lost a rose to wet feet before finding the one that actually wants them? Plant number 6, swamp rose. This is the only rose species that tolerates wet feet, blooming fragrant pink directly out of standing clay water that kills every hybrid tea rose outright. USDA Plants Database confirms its documented wet clay tolerance alongside its fragrant bloom. Zones 3 through 6, full sun to part shade. This wet clay rose delivers fragrant bloom, bright hip, and fall color across 3 full seasons from one single planting. USDA Plants Database confirms its wet clay tolerance alongside a documented 3-season ornamental cycle. No hybrid rose matches. That single $22 plant thrives on neglect, needing zero pruning, feeding, or spraying to perform every year. The single mistake growers make is treating it like a hybrid garden rose, requiring constant maintenance. That wrong routine stresses the plant and wastes both the $22 investment and hours of unnecessary yearly work. That neglect tolerance is exactly why this rose outlasts every hybrid variety, fighting for survival in the same wet clay bed. 6 plants into this clay border, and the pattern is already undeniable. The soil was never the enemy. And earlier in this video, a grower who fought this exact clay for 14 straight years was mentioned. That story is coming right now. Earlier at the start of this video, I mentioned a grower in Indiana who who fought his clay soil for 14 years. This is that story. A 64-year-old Zone 5 grower spent $340 on drainage and wrong plant choices before University of Missouri Extension research on clay's superior nutrient retention finally explained why his soil was never the actual problem. By year 3, his 4 planted perennials turned that same clay yard into the most visited garden on his entire street, with zero irrigation costs since. If you are still watching, this next plant is why this video was made, not for the algorithm, for the grower who stayed until now. And what comes next attracts 33 bee species to a single flower spike most growers walk straight past. Plant number 7, Blue Vervain. This candelabra of purple-blue spikes pulls in 33 documented bee species and hummingbirds at once, more pollinator traffic than almost anything else standing in this clay border right now. University of Wisconsin Extension confirms both that bee count and its clay tolerance in the same published record, Zones 3 through 9, full sun, moist clay. This spike self seeds directly into clay, expanding into a permanent colony without ever requiring a second purchase from any nursery. University of Wisconsin Extension documents its clay tolerance alongside a self-seeding habit. Few growers realize doubles as a permanent investment. That single $16 plant multiplies every season into more coverage across the entire clay border. The single mistake most growers make is deadheading it every fall, like a typical garden perennial. That habit removes the winter bird food source and cancels the self-seeding cycle for next spring entirely. That untouched seed head is the entire reason this colony expands permanently, instead of requiring another purchase every single year. The next plant was documented by Native Americans for fever treatment generations ago, and it remains the single most overlooked clay perennial in American gardening today. That heritage alone is worth staying for. Plant number 8, Boneset. Native Americans documented this flat white bloomer for fever treatment long before any pharmacy existed, and it remains the most overlooked clay perennial in American gardens today. It also attracts over 100 beneficial insect species, the broadest insect value of anything on this entire list. Zones 3 through 8, full sun to part shade, moist clay. This flat white bloomer draws over 100 beneficial insect species, the broadest documented insect value on this entire list. University Extension sources confirm its historical Native American use, alongside this pollinator research finding. That single $16 plant delivers ecological value no other $16 perennial here can match. The single mistake most growers make is cutting it back completely every fall like standard cleanup. Those hollow stems are native bee winter hibernation chambers, and cutting them destroys next year's pollinator population entirely. That uncut stem is the entire reason next year's bee population survives winter in this exact clay border. This next plant thrives where every other perennial on this list would drown outright, and it solves the one thing most clay gardeners never plan for: real winter structure in the wettest corner of the yard. Plant number 9, Sensitive Fern. Its fertile fronds stand upright through winter, long after the summer fronds die back, becoming the exact architectural anchor most clay gardeners never plan for. University of Vermont Extension confirms its wet clay tolerance alongside this winter-standing fertile frond structure. Zones 4 through 9, part shade, wet clay, or shallow water edge. This fern spreads by spore rather than seed, filling wet clay corners permanently without a second nursery purchase. University of Vermont Extension documents this spore base spread alongside its fertile frond winter persistence, a rare trait among clay perennials. That single $18 plant fills an entire wet corner over time, replacing what would otherwise cost hundreds in drainage work. The single mistake growers make is planting it in dry clay, expecting typical fern shade tolerance to compensate. That wrong placement kills it almost immediately, since consistently wet clay is completely non-negotiable here. That non-negotiable moisture rule is exactly why this fern fills a wet corner permanently, instead of dying within a single season. The next plant does something none of the first 9 can. Its flowers, seeds, and leaves are all edible, turning standing clay water into an actual food source worth staying for. Plant number 10, pickerelweed. Its flowers, seeds, and young leaves are all edible, turning standing clay water into an actual food source most growers never realize is possible. USDA Plants Database confirms both its edible status and its role providing duck and waterfowl habitat in wet clay, zones 3 through 10 full sun, standing water or saturated clay. This violet bloomer feeds both people and wildlife at once. Its flowers, seeds, and leaves edible, while doubling as prime duck habitat. USDA Plants Database confirms this dual edible and habitat value, a rare combination among clay-tolerant perennials on this list. That single $20 plant delivers both a food source and a wildlife magnet from one purchase. The single mistake most growers make is planting it in merely moist clay instead of true standing water. That wrong placement stunts growth significantly, since standing water or fully saturated clay is the minimum requirement here. That standing water requirement is exactly why this plant feeds both people and wildlife, where every drier perennial on this list fails completely every time. The next plant has the most unusual bloom form on this entire list, a white drooping tail, 6 inches long, and it solves standing water permanently with zero drainage work. Plant number 11, lizard's tail. Its white flower tail droops 6 inches long, the most unusual bloom form of any perennial on this entire list, and it solves standing water permanently. USDA Plants Database confirms both its documented standing water tolerance and its aggressive clay filling spread. Zones 4 through 9 part shade, standing water, or saturated clay. This drooping white spike spreads aggressively through clay, filling standing water areas permanently without ever needing a second purchase. USDA Plants Database confirms this aggressive clay filling spread as a documented trait unique among the 12 perennials on this list. That single $18 plant expands into full coverage over time, eliminating standing water without any drainage work. The single mistake most growers make is underestimating its spread in a small clay wet area. That colony can overtake nearby perennials fast, so planting it with real room to expand is essential. That real room to expand is exactly why this colony eliminates standing water permanently instead of crowding out the entire clay bed. Plant 12 is still coming, and it grows directly in standing water, attracts 24 butterfly species at once, and eliminates mosquito breeding habitat completely in clay yards. Plant number 12, buttonbush. Its spherical white pincushion blooms attract 24 documented butterfly species simultaneously, the highest butterfly count of anything on this entire list. University of Florida IFAS Extension confirms both this butterfly count and its ability to grow directly in standing water. Zones 5 through 9, this pincushion shrub shades the water surface completely, eliminating mosquito breeding habitat as a side effect of its own growth. University of Florida IFAS Extension confirms this shading effect alongside the 24 butterfly species count in one record. That single $28 plant delivers pest control and pollinator value from one purchase. The single mistake growers make is planting it in merely moist clay instead of true standing water. That wrong placement stunts bloom, since saturated clay or shallow standing water is non-negotiable here. That non-negotiable standing water rule is exactly why this shrub eliminates mosquito habitat, where a dry clay planting never could manage it. All 12 perennials are planted now, and free things about this exact clay border that almost no other source puts together in one place are coming next. Three things about this exact clay perennial border that almost no gardening source ever puts together in one place. A simple squeeze test right in your own backyard confirms your clay is actually nutrient-rich, saving $50 to $150 on soil amendments most growers buy for nothing every season. Native perennials planted directly into unamended clay establish root systems nearly twice as fast as the same species planted in trucked, in topsoil, costing $200 or more per yard. Combine buttonbush, pickerelweed, and lizard's tail in one standing water corner, and that single grouping becomes the most biodiverse section of any American clay yard documented on this list. Together, these 12 perennials permanently eliminate the $520 irrigation system cost and the $200 to $500 annual water bill most clay properties carry every single year. Here is exactly where to begin, based on your zone, right now. Here is exactly where to begin. Zone 2 plants to $1. Zones 3 through 6 growers start with cardinal flower, marsh marigold, blue flag iris, swamp rose, and sensitive fern. 5 cold-hardy clay specialists totaling roughly $90 in plant cost against a $520 irrigation system permanently eliminated, plus $100 to $300 in wrong plant replacement losses avoided every single year. Zone 6 through 9 growers start with Queen of the Prairie, blue vervain, pickerelweed, buttonbush, and lizard's tail. 5 warm zone clay specialists built for standing water, long growing seasons, and permanent irrigation elimination across every property type. Plant this season for full root establishment before fall dormancy arrives, because missing this exact window means your first real result waits a complete extra year. You just discovered 12 zone-accurate, dollar-grounded perennials that turn the clay soil every grower curses into the most productive wildlife garden on the entire street, permanently. If this changed how you see your own backyard clay, hit like right now so other growers stop fighting their soil too. Comment exactly how bad your own backyard clay really is, and which of these 12 perennials you are planting first this coming season. Then subscribe to PlantERLab, because the growers who know more spend far less. And we add to that knowledge every single week for people finally done fighting their soil.